Oh, here we go. Where is my music?
They don't want you to know the truth.
Hey, peace, everybody. Everybody can hear me, right? Just gonna do a quick like. All right. So, peace, everybody. People always ask me who did that theme music, and that was Stickman. I commissioned it from him. And at the end, when you hear my younger niece, who's now a little bit older, say they don't want you to know the truth, I'm like, we need even more words for what that means in this time. But first and foremost, I'm glad to be back on, fam. You know, like we're all going through stuff. It's all, but I have to say, had this amazing conversation with Charles Barron, and literally, I've like been awake in the best ways for 2 days, you know, and then we see what has happened in New York City, and we want to talk about the impact of that and what that means for the rest of the country. Hopefully, my other guest, Maria Isa, will be able to connect. Maria, if you see me and you can't, I totally understand. We'll figure it out another time. Maria Isa is the state representative in Minnesota, and Hortman, the white woman and her husband that were assassinated. That was her mentor, you know. So I mean, it was a straight political assassination, and best believe Charles and Inez know about that a lot, fam. You know, and we're gonna probably see a lot more of those, you know. So again, thank you for being here. Disrupt the Chaos, sponsored by Cooperation Jackson, and I'm just really excited because I think something happened that's bigger than who might end up being the mayor. But I also think something is happening bigger. I feel like the energy shifting. I feel that once people really begin to read what this budget bill that they're trying to pass and the draconian cuts to every single program. I mean, how do you cut? It takes a special evilness to say we're going to cut the suicide hotline for transgender youth. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's a lot that many people that voted for him are going to be losing their SNAP benefits and their Medicaid, you know, and it's going to get worse. And I feel the only way it gets better is what Cooperation Jackson has been pushing for the last couple of years. We're going to have to do a general strike in this country, and it's not too far. That I'm sure it's going to happen, and then we have to be ready for the massive amount of repression that is going to come. But with that, I'm so excited to have again Charles Barron, Inez Barron, City Council people, Assembly people, both, and still out there talking some of it into still deal with this electoral political project, and then of course my comrade Kali Okuno, with Cooperation Jackson and all the great work that Cooperation Jackson is doing around self-determination and mutual aid. So look, I'm just grateful to have you all on. So, I see I'm gonna add Maria Isa Taki. Okay, here you go, sis. Hey, unmute.
Peace.
Hey, how are you?
One day at a time, but it's beautiful to see you. Always.
Well, listen, fam, this is Maria Isa. She told me this the last time I saw her. She saw me in high school, and I was like, oh my God, I'm really old because now you're a state representative. That I hope one day you will become the governor of Minnesota. You know, I'm pushing you for that. But Maria Isa, you know, I wanted to bring you on just like in general, I hadn't seen you. And unfortunately, the tragic events that took place. But also, if you could just maybe drop a little bit of knowledge around your work specifically around diabetes awareness and how you push for that so hard. And unfortunately, the federal government seems to be going on some massive acts, you know, cuts that are going to impact so many of the people. So, yeah, Maria, like, first and foremost, again, your mentor and all that you all have been dealing with after that political assassination that took place. You wrote a beautiful statement, and I know you needed some time to be able to talk about it. If you could just give us a few things that, you know, were imparted by you by her and what she meant to you and the state.
First and foremost, Representative Maria Isa Perez Vega. I'm sorry if it's a little loud. I'm outside of a district event that I'm glad to be here supporting Latina chefs from Venezuela and Puerto Rico. I represent District 65. I represent District 65B in the capital city of St. Paul, Minnesota, as well. I don't know if my connections are right.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. But yeah, I represent where the Capitol stands in the state of Minnesota in my second term. I sit on Capital Investment Committee, early Children and Families Committee, as well as Education Finance. Coming that I'm a hip hop artist, I'm a child of hip hop, a scholar of hip hop, and also a type 1 diabetic, in which utilizing the elements have been able to curate the continuous movements for social justice and human rights. I'm a daughter of a young lord, daughter of New Yorkers, granddaughter of all Boricua grandparents, and I'm Soda Rican, and I always hold that because that's the mission of the power of the people, whether we be on the island or Nueva York or Minnesota, where we have been facing the realization of what's always impacted our communities of movements, social justice, and leaders. Um, and unfortunately, you know, we are facing what this MAGAism is in this era, that took the life of my speaker emeritus, Melissa Hortman, Representative Hortman, and her husband and her dog, too. I served, you know, 3 sessions. My first term where we brought a trifecta together, and I became what she called the rep who raps, you know. It's been very difficult. I appreciate the time and the space that a lot of folks have been giving me, but as well as also the platforms to talk about the realities that continue. You know, people think Minnesota, they think that.
She froze up a little. It'll reconnect. Yeah. Well, as I believe it will reconnect, I do want to read part of her bio, which is really dope. Where is it? Uh, she is known as one of the top artists in the Twin Cities, featured everywhere. And the day she took the oath, she dropped a hip hop album. So it's like, you know, I'm like, that's hip hop. Like that's it right there. And obviously Charles Agnes Kali her being a daughter from the Young Lords, and you know, seeing her mom and seeing really the amazing work they've done there to make a space for particularly Boricuas. But a lot of stance that Maria has taken really has been great. She's young, you know, like I said, I want her to be governor. The connection dropped, so we're just gonna keep it moving. I'll bring Maria on another time. But just spam, check out her Instagram and look. She's the type that she'll go to a political event and then she's going to be drumming and rhyming like 2 hours later on the stage with all of this. So that's a beautiful thing. So yeah, let's get to it. She's back. This is live, y'all. This is what happens. Maria, can you hear
I'm
us?
I can hear you. I can hear you, Clemente.
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch base and say I appreciate the support and give our respects to someone that we lost that was a very strong advocate as the third woman speaker of the House, who really pushed for us. You know, she was a white woman who recognized her privilege. She was my sparring coach. You know, she graduated from Harvard Law School. We had conversations about Pedro Albizu Campos and why I was so passionate. Her world was so different than mine. And but when I first got elected, while many folks were skeptical about who's this hip hop artist that's now a lawmaker, she believed in me and she recognized the influence that and advocacy that I had to empower young people. You know, Rosa, you made something noticeable that you know me since high school. Now I'm almost close to 40, and the kids that I taught in high school are now making sure that New York City has a progressive mayor coming up in the next election. You know, so like these are the avenues of when we are in a time that is very critical, and having those conversations with my colleagues at the end of a special session that was the last time I seen my speaker, where we were sparring and challenging about healthcare and undocumented rights. And you know, she said challenge it and speak up, and even if we have to go through these messed up negotiations, you don't have to, you know, and I'll take the hit. And that was who Hortman was. You know, she was compassionate, she took her leadership very serious. And I'm the vice chair of the People of Color Indigenous Caucus and also the chair of the City of St. Paul's delegation at the state. And she was so proud to see the, you know, only Puerto Rican elected in those chambers. You know, a girl from the capital city who has pride of being Latina, being Boricua, being from the barrio, taking those initiatives and carrying our history to fight for justice. And she never took my mic away. You know, there's so much survival that I've had to come through, whether it be, you know, having a chronic illness like diabetes and fighting for insulin for all, whether it be having accessibility to ethnic studies, whether it be how do we challenge, you know, the history of police violence in the state that killed, you know, George Floyd, who was my security, like all of these layers of trauma. She was always wondering, you know, how do you in these movements push forward? And I said, we have to work collaboratively with the folks who do have their doctorates or their law degree from Harvard. And if we don't have that privilege, and that was something that, you know, is making me strong right now, is that she empowered us. She didn't try to take our light away. She empowered women of color to say, I'm not going to speak on your behalf. You're going to speak. And if I'm out of pocket, let me know. And so I'm going to hold that with me through these difficult times, that we are going to have to continue moving. You know, we are now facing not only an assassination, but the realities of like, I've been on lists, but not on government lists of attacking as a political, you know, elected official, and having to get my daughter and my mother out of my home. You know, these are the things that my mother feared about when I became an elected official, because she's been through those movements and surviving her leaders being killed. And so, you know, you don't want to see that in the general, but the reality is here, it's been here. And it's a time for us to recognize, but also to keep fighting for the next generation to take their platform. Because this isn't just about Minnesota or New York. This is about global movements. And it's time, the time is right now for us to make sure that we are educating through this pain, through this continued trauma, and take our places to make that change.
Yeah, and you know, before I let you go, I, I want to again highlight that it's a political assassination, and unfortunately, there will be more. We don't know who, but that's why I'm also like, I mean, on a very personal level, I asked you, I was like, are you safe? You home? With your security? We've seen attacks from what they've done, whether people agree with the end of the politics or these certain organizations. We've seen the attacks on Alinda Sassour and Tamika Mallory, Patrice Cullors, Melina Abdullah, like, and now that people could just get your information, but they also, come at your children and they come at your elders. So that's why we always want to know, are you safe with your daughter of the young Lord? So we know you're going to be safe. And I'm just glad you had some time to join us tonight. I want to bring you on in the future. And I think you got a big, yeah. I think she's gonna run for governor in the future. So she's incredible. So let's get to it. Like I said, Charles and Inez. So Charles, Davey D, you just did an interview earlier today with Davey D. He sent me some of what you said, and I just want to read a little bit of it. Where what one of the things you said, charts are showing exactly what you said. This is Davey D's synopsis of the interview that he did with Charles earlier today. Hard Knock Radio just came on, so folks can go already and listen to it at Hard Knock Radio. Barron, who served alongside both candidates, described Cuomo as a political fraud who failed Black communities by slashing public benefits, underfunding education, overseeing deadly COVID nursing home policies, all while dodging accountability for sexual harassment allegations, 13 of them. Mamdani, by contrast, was praised for his consistency on progressive issues, though Barron warned that Mamdani did not earn the Black vote and must now be held accountable by Black communities who were largely sidelined in his campaign. So when I read that, I was like, okay, because when I was looking last night, I was like, oh yeah, this was like kind of a typical like young millennial crowd with no really visible Black folks, And so I just kept looking at it and then obviously reading. And I mean, like straight up, Democrat socialists of America, socialists in general of that, they're not good with race. Like, that's the truth. So then I pull up this chart and I said exactly, because Councilman Barron was right. So if you look at this, fam, see right here in the Bronx, Cuomo rode the Bronx, right? So you can see the pink is Mamdani's, the rest is Cuomo, right? And it speaks exactly to what Charles you were saying, right? Like not visible. And then I've seen though, like an organization like Equality for Flatbush, or the work that Maurice Mitchell has done with the Working Families Party. But then again, going to that, I was wondering, because I know you're not saying it in this vein, but I think when I was reading like the comments that Sharpton made, Espaillat, like the kind of old school Black Latino men who all of a sudden want to support a Black woman, and just it's Sharpton and it's Espaillat. It's like, like coming from them, I'm not really trying to hear anything, but then of course I see it and what you spoke to. So first of all, when you saw that he won, reaction from both of you, and second, how does he have to shift? Because if it's going to be a general election, I would assume that Adams and Cuomo both are going to be flush with money just to keep him out, and what that could look like.
Well, Zoran is going to be the next mayor of New York City. They had more money than you can imagine behind Cuomo, $25 million. As a matter of fact, Bloomberg gave $8.5 million himself to these independent PACs. See, my thing is that it's not about DSA, it's not about Mamdani, or it's us. We have a void. We don't have an independent Black radical electoral movement, not just to hold people accountable, but to take seats of power ourselves. So I worked in the state assembly with Mamdani. He's a nice guy. He's progressive on the issues. He'll support all of our stuff. But like all those in the DSA, they become politicians after they get in. I've been in the city council with about 3, 4, 5 of them who were elected. We met before that, some progressive caucus. We said that we would not support Adrian Adams for speaker or anybody that Mayor Adams puts forward. Before I could blink, they were supporting Adrian Adams. He was giving them, chairs of committees. And I said, man, y'all turn just like politicians. So my concern about Mamdani. Cuomo doesn't deserve the black vote, and Mamdani didn't earn the black vote. He won on a coalition of whites, Asians, and Latinos. He won in some areas in the black community, but that's his coalition. So we're in a bind in that we don't want to deal with the neo-colonial black puppets of the Democratic Party, the sellout Negroes in the party. His politics is far more progressive, but it's not black focused. So my thing, and I'll be talking to him down the road a bit, I'm just saying things publicly now. Publicly, he didn't want to deal with black issues. You know what they tried to do to us? The same thing Barack Obama did. They universalized it. It's health care for everybody. It's pre-K for everybody. So black people will benefit from that. I said, no, if you don't specify black power, black poverty, what you're going to do about black unemployment, dealing with black homelessness, crime in the black community. He did that with the Asians, and he did that trying to appease the Jews. He's trying to do that, focusing on them. But when it comes to us, we're in some universal things. So he won. The good thing about it is that Cuomo got whipped, and all of those sellout Negroes who criticized Cuomo and said he should resign wound up supporting him, like Greg Meeks and so many others, when he came against a socialist. So I'm glad Mamdani won. I'm glad he beat him. I'm glad he beat all the sellout Negroes. I'm glad he beat the millionaires and billionaires. And he could run or not run in the general. He's going to lose. Eric Adams, I believe, is going to lose. That, some people, unfortunately, blindly vote Democratic in the general election. They're more specific in the Democratic primaries. But we got to sit with this brother and say, hey, man, I'm not dancing in the street right about now. I want you to make a commitment. You was with me and we were supporting reparations. Why didn't you say anything about reparations during the campaign? We got political prisoners that you need to speak to. We got poverty. And don't just generally talk about poverty. We need a multi-billion-dollar anti-poverty program for the black and brown communities. We need that, and we need a workforce development program for our communities, and we need community land trusts, CLTs, and worker cooperatives funded. That's a socialist kind of characteristic thing for the black community, not in general. So that's what I'm going to be putting pressure on him. I'm going to be saying stuff publicly until our people realize, whether it's the sellout Negroes and sycophants in the Democratic Party, or whether it's the Democratic Socialists and the Working Families Party, nobody has a black agenda for black people, and we should not support anyone that doesn't have a specific agenda for black people.
Well, I'm glad you say that, because again, somebody here, Stella, says we need to get an updated chart. But my family's in the Bronx. My father's business is in the Bronx. AOC is not faring well in the Bronx. Many people from that community have gone to many town halls and asked her, where are you? Like, you're never here. You're not dealing with the issue specifically. It's specifically in Soundview. So to me, it makes sense, right? That if people in the Bronx who voted in AOC and are not pleased of what she is doing, or what she is not doing, right? Kind of just showing up as a Boricua at the parade, kind of thing, it makes sense. I also wonder that the S word, socialism, right? But then I'm like, nah, because the Bronx is the most racial borough, and there's a reason.
That don't automatically translate to a support for socialism, though, Rosa. Because
I know that, and part of it is, I would say this too, like, there's still a fear when a lot of Latinos hear that term.
Right. I was about to go there.
Not from Boricuas, because we know, right? Like, and that's why I always tell people, like, what's also missing, I think, Inez, is, right, a specific Black agenda, but also an understanding of the Puerto Rican community in New York City, who gets nothing from most of these politicians anyway, because we don't fit what a Latino is. We're not immigrants. Like, we get that, right? Like, I didn't ask to be a US citizen. But the relationship between African American and Puerto Ricans are so intertwined in the city that it makes sense to me that Boricuas and African American people are saying, wait, you're really not focusing. You're using this kind of Black universal language, or universal language of the people and the this and the that. I mean, I even was like, my dad's like, I heard his speech, he didn't even shout out the Bronx. I'm like, yeah, well, he didn't shout out the Bronx, so he didn't really know the Bronx. But Inez, from your experience and what you're seeing, what's your just analysis on what else he's gonna have? Well, how else should African American Puerto Ricans should be pushing him on certain things? And as a Boricua, like, I need someone to talk about and someone to be behind us getting our independence and stopping this whole nonsense of whether we want to be a colony or not. And just like reparations, AOC or Mandami don't speak to that at all.
Well, Rosa, first of all, good to see you, and thank you for inviting us to be on your program. Brother Khalid, good to see you as well. We're just in the throes of watching what's happening. It's interesting. The polls until the very end said that Cuomo had this as a walkaway. He just had to be there. His name alone would get him the results that he expected and that he wanted, and that his billionaire friends wanted, and that corporate America wanted, and that Wall Street wanted, and that the media wanted. All of them were backing him. And there are also those Democrats who have allowed him to continue to bully them. Cuomo is a bully. I learned that from watching what he did in Albany, and how my colleagues in the assembly would allow that to happen, would get behind closed doors and would complain. But other than Charles Barron confronting him publicly, they just tolerated all of that. So the polls were projecting that he would be the winner. They thought perhaps it would be close at the beginning, but that as the evening wore on, he would pull away. And then with, of course, the ranked votes coming in later on, he would cement that position. Lo and behold, that did not happen. It says a lot. It says to me that you can't depend on polls. Polls are controlled by those media corporations, and they have their own interests at heart. They have their own agenda, and they're going to, I think, always project something to benefit the people that they are supporting. So all of those billions of dollars that was spent on that campaign didn't translate into getting him into that position. I think that people are beginning to become more aware with this problem of having Democrats and Republicans looking like each other. People are beginning to wonder and question, what else can we do? What else is there? How else can we make this assessment rather than looking at those party labels? And we're beginning to see that. And when it was pointed out, hey, just so you know, the same people who backed Trump are backing Cuomo, I think that struck a note, a very resounding note for people who were casting their votes. And it reminded me when the polls said that Hillary Clinton was going to win the election. The polls all said that, but that didn't turn out to be true. So we know that we cannot depend on these polls, and we know that we cannot allow these polls to influence our decision. When we have a candidate, and that wasn't the candidate that we voted for, but when we have a candidate that we believe represents our issues, don't be hesitant to back that candidate. Now, we vote in our own candidates because as progressive as he presents himself, he did not did not see the need to interact with the Black community on the ground. He did not think that it was important to talk about the issues that are important to us. So when people don't do that, and very telling to me was his opposition to the position that the retirees had, that they were due their pension benefits and that they should not have to be required to fill in that 20% gap, which New York agreed to do some 50 years ago and has done. He doesn't support the retirees in that battle. That's very telling to me. And to me, that's perhaps he's kowtowing to that other union that holds that same position and says, yeah, DC 37.
Yeah. And
so,
go ahead.
You call yourself a socialist, you wear that label, that hat, but you don't think that the people who worked in city positions and have now retired and for years have been entitled to that, you don't think that they have that entitlement, that they should keep it, even though all of the 11 court decisions leading up to the final one said that they were entitled to that? That's very concerning to me. Very, very concerning.
Yeah, and to bring Kali into the conversation, after it was looking like he was winning, Kali posted this on his Instagram. To all my New York City comrades, strap up. The duopoly is going to do everything it can to undermine Namdami. Should he win, there will be a capital strike. Federal funding of all sorts will be cut and curtailed. Trump will double down ICE raids, and that's just the beginning. And learning from Jackson and what we did right and what we did wrong over the past 13 years is going to take a concerted action for the left to act scale, and particularly to the scale of New York City. And don't underestimate the amount of narrative work that we are all going to do. You know, so Kali, I mean, as always, I'm like, let me know right now. And you did. And I wonder if you could speak to that, because, I mean, look, is Trump and them going to go as hard as you're saying in New York if he becomes, okay. Yeah, so talk about that.
Communist lunatic, right? And CNN has been parroting that all day. I mean, I only watched it like 2 or 3 times in part to get prepared for this. I went through all the little bourgeois media doing a little thing.
They're all having meltdowns.
You know, CNN is doing a direct attack. They getting mouthpieces to do it. You know, Democrat and Republican. MSNBC is just having, you know, their commentators do the attack, but it's already on. And I think, you know, what I'm concerned about is that I think there's a lot of, by all accounts, I think he should win, but I think folks are celebrating a bit prematurely. And I got a lot of questions for y'all, Charleston, and there's really, I think, because one of the things I am concerned about, and I'm waiting to hear more, you know, y'all comments and learn from y'all and hear the interview with David D. But I was looking at that map, right? And while it looks, you know, I know New York a little bit, especially the black areas, like the black and Puerto Rican areas, because, you know, I done ran them streets, you know, whenever I could the last 30-something years. So, and it was very glaring to me that some of our neighborhoods went to Cuomo. And so one of the pieces that I'm concerned about, that I think Adams is going to pick up immediately, and if some of the stuff I saw in the Post, he was already angling in that regard already. What I'm concerned about is that the Democratic Party, with the support of Bloomberg, with the support of some other major capital coming in, including some of Elon Musk money, which I've already seen some posts that he's willing to throw down to make sure that Mamdani doesn't win, and that's just one particular representative. But I think they're going to try to pick up and fashion a new coalition to keep him from winning that consists of black folks who are disaffected for the very reasons that Charles and Inez just you know outlined, plus the old Democratic Party, you know, Negro tendership that exists within the Democratic Party, and they're going to try to marry that a very particular Jewish coalition and vote in New York City on this line that him being pro-Palestinian means he's automatically anti-Semitic. And if folks don't think that could potentially be higher, I think you're misreading the situation because it's that particular.
On that point, Brad Lander is like you know, Brad Lander's right next to him, right? And everybody saw what happened to Brad Lander. right? So there's been less of a conversation, even talking about him being anti-Semitic. Because how are people going to do?
No, but it's elevating now. This one
Okay.
thing I would warn people against, Rosa, is it's one thing for the media to go after him when they didn't think he was going to win. He's now in a pole position, right? Everybody else has been eliminated from the field. So he can stand there and represent a particular section of the Jewish vote. But that ain't the Zionist section of the Jewish vote at all, right? And when I say the Zionist section of the Jewish vote, you got to also add into the other component of how both the Democrats and the Republicans are pro-Zionist themselves to a high degree and going to defend that by all costs. And they're going to make this a national campaign. This is not going to be a local, not that New York is a local by any other stretch of the imagination anyway, but this is going to be a national and international focused campaign that they're going to really throw down on. And it's different when you are now the front runner and the only subject of in focus of attack, right? And best believe, I think Cuomo, despite his ego, he'll likely sit this out, right? Because the Democrats would tell him, sit this out. We'd rather have Adams in there than we would rather have somebody, AKA Bernie Sanders. And I'm bringing up Bernie Sanders because, look, don't think that the Democratic Party won't cut your throat, even if you in the umbrella. They did it 2 times within living memory, right? Just with Bernie's campaign on a national level around even weaker issues, right? Now, these folks are very committed towards this ethnic cleansing and this genocide, and they've done a great job of equating any criticism of Israel as being automatically anti-Semitic. And Mandani has not figured out how to crack that nut. He's kind of backed away from it a bit here the last at least a couple of weeks. If I'm wrong on that, somebody correct me, right? But I think he's been weak in kind of trying to have it a little bit both ways rather than planting a solid flag and saying, no, I'm with Palestinian, self-determination and liberation. That does not mean I'm, quote unquote, anti-Semitic. And criticizing the state of Israel does not translate into an anti-Semitic position. Any state can and should be criticized for its human rights records and what it does to people, and they are no different, and there's no exception should be made. Now, I think if he would have stayed on a position like that, I'm not sure if some of them same folks would have stood with him. And watch, this is one that he's going to have to figure out in the next weeks. It's going to be very clear whether he's waffle, towards the Zionist camp, or if he's going to waffle, or try to continue this line of having play it both ways. And one of the big pieces, watch, y'all mark my way. It's going to be some of the Negroes that you describing, Charles and I, there, that's going to come at him the hardest on this particular piece.
Well, that's
let me just say this real quick, Rosa.
we got Ricky Torres, right? Like,
right
already.
See,
and older guard, that doesn't include Charles. See, with you and Inez, when people say the old guard, I'm talking about the Sharpens, the Espayats, who actually, like, anytime they say something, no young person's going to gravitate towards that. People gravitate towards you both because you have been true to your principles and ethics. So yeah, Charles, like, how do we look at it then?
See, what you're right. Your analysis is correct. The reason why I think he's going to win, and you're right, it's not going to be a cakewalk.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the normal, well, you got the Democratic line, so you automatically going to win. It is not going to be like that. But I think the reason why he'll probably pull it out is because, one, Eric Adams is bad news. Eric Adams is very difficult to push on the Black community now. You'll have some of these Negroes that'll go with him, but Eric Adams was the worst mayor since Rudolph Giuliani. Eric Adams brought back the street crime unit that de Blasio took out. Eric Adams was against no cash bail when we're trying to let our brothers and sisters off of Rikers Island with violent crimes. Eric Adams cut every city agency's budget when I'm sitting there looking at a surplus. a surplus in $115 billion budget, and he's cutting stuff. Eric Adams has a bloated police budget of $11 million. He cut the education budget by $450 million, and the police have $11 billion. He has been bad news. And then everybody's seeing him as a sellout to Donald Trump to save his own hide. So he is a tough candidate to gain that kind of excitement around. The challenge is the business community is telling Cuomo, stay in, stay in. And then the politicians are saying, get out, because if you and Eric are in, you're going to split that vote and Mamdani is going to win. But if just one of you are in, then we could unite that vote and perhaps beat them. So that's what their strategy is. But one of the things that does happen in general elections all the time is it gets into party. So like if you a Democrat, sometimes they don't even look at the names; they just go straight down. So it is not going to be a cakewalk. This is why I think that he should take care of the Black community. He should hear us, because I am not going to push people toward him just to stop Trump and stop. I ain't doing that no more. If you want our vote, you're going to have to generally take care of Black and Latino people, Black and brown people. You got to take care of us, or else we're not going to be pushing people for you just because, Trump and them and Wall Street and the real estate. I'm tired of, doing stuff to stop other people instead of starting us. Just like AOC and Bernie Sanders, they got in there and they pushing Joe Biden. They pushing Kamala Harris, and they pushing genocide in Israel, genocide in Africa, AFRICOM. So if you doing all of that stuff, don't tell me I got to stop Trump to let you do the genocide and hiddenly instead of Trump openly. So that's going to be the challenge. And I know some preachers, that say he got to come and talk to us on how we're going to get affordable housing, money. He is going to be the custodian of $116 billion budget with billion on the side that's unrestricted that he could use for anything. So we have to say, you have to make that kind of commitment. I think that what they really shocked at, the whole country was turning right, with Trump and a couple of congresspersons who were, Democratic socialists or leftists lost. And so they thinking me and Inez are out. So and our district always goes with Cuomo and the machine. They just liked us. So they went against the machine for us, but they're not going to do it for anybody else. So I just think that he needs to really, if he hits the Black community right, he got it. If he plays around with us, they can manipulate. See, then them Negroes will say, you see, don't let Charles and them put you toward the socialist guy. He ain't even for Black people, So you get some.
Yes, like again, it's the same thing as African American Puerto Ricans in New York. He hasn't done that for either of us. It's just the assumption, that nothing can be worse. Well, things can always be worse, especially if it's propaganda, which, look, it's difficult for me, has been, to critique AOC, but I think for me, that moment when the president did whatever speech he did, and they were all in there doing their TikTok dances and videos, and I'm like, what are y'all doing? Like, people are dying right now. I know you didn't do it, quote, to be funny, but what the F? Like, you don't do that. How you sitting there? Like, I'm like, you want to talk about good trouble? All of y'all should have got up and sat down, and have, the entire world see what this administration is about. So for me, like, the squad, Cori Bush, and they took her out. There's a reason why some of them are still left. They're not seen as those disruptors anymore. So then I want to just and Holly, I want to ask you this.
Mhm.
Thanks everybody for all the comments. There are Black folks who say that all electoral politics is anti-radical. Yes, that's true. I mean, I hear what you're saying, sis. I think part of that is to definitely some of the Black Panther Party, BLA, Young Lords, and those folks at the beginning were like run for office. That's the only thing we could do. And that's why I was referencing the long conversation. Thank you, Charles, for being on and really breaking it down, because I was like, I'm over this. And you're like, no, like these things can now be not only, no campaign is ever just local anymore, as Kali was saying. So while we know most likely he wins, we know certain communities, he has to what.
I want to go back to where I'm saying me and Charles agree, right?
Uh-huh.
I think under most circumstances, I would agree that he should likely win, but he's going to have to earn it. And part of that, I'm going to steal your word, Charles. He's going to have to earn it from us.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
He's going to have to earn it from us.
That's
And there's gaps in his framework is where I was going, and weaknesses. And as Charles had already, brought out, like there's unfortunately there is a record of DSA candidates that we have to look at and examine very carefully.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And if we don't want the same type of outcome, then there's going to have to be pressure from the community, from the grassroots,
There you go.
to make this campaign be
That's
anything that is worthy of the rhetoric that he's been espousing and putting out. So the pressure and the piece has to be organized by us. This is one of the things that I think we didn't do a good job.
Right.
Once we won in Jackson, we didn't really keep some of the pressure on in a particular way from the grassroots level, because it was like, well, our people are going to handle it, right? But our people were in office battling the corporations. But we wasn't there to push the corporations or to push y'all need to stay the course and keep your back straight, right? Stay firm.
Yeah.
Right. And so these are some of the pieces I think that have to be learned. And the only piece was worried about just catching up on everything last night and throughout the day. I've just seen some stuff that came from Jacobin and from committees of correspondence. And it's a lot of premature celebration as if the thing is already won. And there's not a fight to be had. Still, there's not some ground to be gained. And there's an underestimation of what the Democratic Party machine is going to do.
That's right.
And
it's
how
already, like you said,
with the right. And so that's the piece that I'm concerned about. And I'm most concerned, I got to start with my own folks, is that given how we have been positioned and abused on the Democratic Party plantation, but there's a whole bunch of our folks who get tenders from there, right, and who get various appointments and handouts from they don't want to cut. That is a weakness that he's going to have to confront. Now, how do you confront that weakness? You got to do what Charles and I there said. You better come speak to us.
That's right.
Concrete promises about addressing our particular issues. Don't just blanket over them. Don't just do the gloss over, right? Don't do the narrow socialist, white socialist thing, which is all issues get reduced down to class. When no, reality is far more complex than that. Right? Ask any black person or any woman that you can't reduce everything down to just class. That's not how the world works. Then you have to deal with some specific constituencies and what their needs are. And we got to start with ours because that's what we know best and that's what we represent. Yeah. So there's a fight to be had here.
They may not vote for the opposition. They will stay home.
Stay home. Right.
See, that was one of the problems even in this.
Yeah, turnout was not good in terms of the numbers.
Black community. They just said, I don't like anybody. I'm staying home. So even if he got 90% of our vote in November, if it's 90% of 10% that come out, you don't have anything. So for him to really assure his victory, he has to get to the black community. And the black community, they're like, first of all, they're in a survival mode. straight up survival. You know, they want, you're gonna put some bread on the table, you're gonna, you know, survival. They're tired of being lied to. They don't have no faith and belief in politicians. They lie all the time. They're sick of the sellout Negroes who deliver nothing to them after getting their votes. So he has to come along now knowing that that's the kind of group. You can't just say, I'm gonna have free busing and everybody can ride, even black people. I'm gonna have pre-K. Now I know pre-K, even if you say that in universality and universal lit, we have trouble getting pre-K in black communities.
Yeah.
Ever you pushing, it's a problem in the black community. You have to say black. You have to say black. You can't avoid
help build up the particular resources that are needed that have been intentionally neglected for decades.
Got to do that, and it's a bad start saying that you're not going to support. You know that retiree money is $600 million to pay for the Medicare gap, the 20% that the feds are not paying in health and Medicare, the 20% you got to get on your own. For 50 years, the city council paid it for the retirees. Eric comes along and wants Aetna to privatize it so he can keep the 600, and wants to go with Aetna, and Aetna then insured African people for the European enslaver. And so he don't care about none of that. We beat him back on everything, and he took a step back because we beat him so badly. Now he's leaving the 600 million. We won that. But Mamdani is against that. So he now can take it out. And he got to assure people he's not going to do that. How could you be? And the reason why? Because DC 37, which is one of the biggest unions in the city, said anybody that touches Barron's bill or does what he says around these retirees, we're going to withdraw our support and money. He caved into that. So if he can cave into that, he's vulnerable to cave. He's a politician now. And all of the, the pragmatism overtakes the principles and the ideology.
And I also, something that stands out for me is, right, he has hardly used the word black as it means to race and ethnicity. He spoke to no specific issues of women, particularly Black maternal health, and how so many Black women, as you know, in your district and in New York City have died giving birth, and the numbers are growing. His campaign said nothing about reproductive rights and said nothing, and I don't think he will. What are you going to be doing when the next Black or brown person is murdered by the NYPD? I need to know that now. Because if you become the mayor, we already know, in general, the NYPD is going to kill another Black and brown person. We don't know when or where it's going to happen. What's his stance on that? He wasn't even asked the question, but these are the two things I specifically did notice. Like, come on, you got to talk about the NYPD. He's too afraid already. So in that sense, around the pragmatic thing, but Inez, around specifically, like, again, because obviously Black women vote in high numbers, but there's nothing in this campaign that I think speaks to, again, not only Black maternal health, but Black women and reproductive rights, and what does it look like, well, it's not a good look, is what I'm saying. He said nothing about Black women. And I think that's important too.
Right. I didn't hear him say anything about it. I didn't go through his platform with a fine-tooth comb to see if, in fact, it's there. But as you said, he did not make that one of the outstanding issues in his campaign, his platform. He was talking about busing, free busing. He talking about minimum wage, raising the minimum wage, and those things that are generic, as we said, to a larger population. But as Charles has said before, our population, Black, Latino, that population, and particularly women, in terms of the issue of maternal mortality being so much greater than what it is for white women, is an area that has to be specific for our communities. How are we going to address that? What are we going to do to make sure that, and the issue of diabetes, which is so prevalent in our community amongst our people is addressed, and carve outs for that, targeted money for that. Those are the kinds of issues that he's going to have to address, particularly for the Black and Latino community. Listen, these areas where we see that the data shows that there's great disparity are going to need addressing in a particular dedicated fashion. And what is it that you're going to do to be able to increase that? So in our community, we realized that, and we were able to have the Betty Shabazz Health Center established. Right. And that's something you've got to be targeted, you've got to be specific, you've got to make sure that you address those issues that are certainly pinpointed. Data is there, it shows what the problems are, and we need to make sure. And what are we going to do about making sure that our community, that we don't lose our green space, so that we can be able to have our gardens, because there's a whole push about not having seeds to plant and not having fresh water, so that these billionaires are buying, corporations are buying up the land along rivers, particularly out in the Midwest. But what are we going to do to make sure that we have access to all of those requirements? You know, he has the broad things, but again, particularly as it relates to our communities that have been disadvantaged and ignored, what are you going to do to make those kind of corrections? So those are some of the issues that he's going to have to respond to, very targeted.
And let me tell you something about his plans. Most of them takes state approval.
Yeah.
You ain't taxing the wealthy, because New York City doesn't apply any wealth tax. You can't do the stock transfer tax to get 16 billion that they rebate back to Wall Street. That's a state issue. So a lot of his stuff is state stuff that he has to really do. And then the other piece is that it is easy to look at New York City, and when you see, I have to repeat this, $116 billion is the budget. The state budget is $252 billion, and Hochul has another $15 billion on the side, an unrestricted fund. So here they are sitting with $300-400 billion in one state. That's just the expense budget. There's a capital budget that goes along with that. New York City has a capital budget of $169 billion for the next 10 years. So I'm going to say to him, Zoran, I was up there in Albany with you. You know what you need to do? How about taking $20 million and turn that into $200 million, which is chump change, and build a community center as we built in East New York that has a whole lot of stuff to it. We made a developer do that, else I wasn't signing off on this project. And in there, Black youth run the whole center. They got 20, 30 jobs. We got a serious gymnasium, a recording studio, computers, you name it. Why isn't one of those or two of those in every Black and brown community in the city? That is less than 1% of the capital budget. It's stuff like that you got to come in with.
And then, Kali, if you could speak to that as well around the choice self-determination. I just want to also know, and I always have to say, so many people think New York City is the state of New York, and it's not. There's just many Black and Latino folks past the Hudson Valley. I live right around the capital of the Albany, right? And Hochul, you know, has been interesting in the sense that she always looks very like clear and no nonsense, but then the things she's doing are going to impact particularly the upstate area, right? So she's the governor, as Charles and Inez were saying. A lot of what gets done, she could stop it or has to approve it. But, you know, in this moment that we're in, with what's going on with nuclear sites and all of that, you know, everything that's happening international, I'm not making it not a big thing, but she announces yesterday that somewhere from Albany to central New York, she wants to build a nuclear power plant. When for 40 years, people fought to stop Indian Point up in Croton Hudson in Westchester County. You know, I remember in high school, we were learning that that was not a good thing, you know, like having that nuclear thing. But so the younger generation, they're seeing it now and are probably so terrified, like, is there going to be a nuclear war? No, not in that sense. But then you have Hopeful doing something that everybody knows should not be done, but yet touting how being better on the climate, you know, and a lot of the things she's doing is not. And she has a kind of disdain for New York City in general. So people just need to have that context. But Kali, obviously, Jackson, we have to have a bigger conversation when Elder, now Ancestor Chokwe Lumumba was voted in, and the bigger conversation about the Jackson Kush plan that has now brought cooperation Jackson. So, you know, 13 years, like you said, if you could, yeah, just let folks know a little bit of how that got done. And I know we're going over a little bit.
Well, just a couple of things in the interest of time. I'll touch on some of that, but just a couple of things I want to get out there. Number one, just realize, you know, for the audience that you know, I'm involved in a lot of the international work around, you know, climate change. Been deeply involved in that work now for about 15 years on the international level, and we've lost this battle around nuclear energy.
We've lost that battle
for the time being. Just for the time being, you know, when I say certain things like that, like, you know, like these fights are long gone. There are no permanent answers. There are no permanent solutions. We can win today, and another generation comes along and outmaneuver and undo what we have done. We've seen it time and time again. This is why, you know, constant political education is a vital necessity for anything that we do, and we cannot just kind of rest on we won that and it's irreversible. That's not the case. And that's definitely what's going on with nuclear on the international stage. That's being built as, you know, one of the forms of kind of clean energy. It's a major way by which, in particular, the United States and the capital forces around it feel that they have a competitive advantage over their international allies, particularly China, which is the number one. And they're trying to find some ways that they can kind of cut them off and then have a kind of energy advantage, which is one of the reasons why they're going after Iran in the way that they're going. They know damn full and well Iran could have made, if they wanted to, accelerated their program to make nuclear weapons a long time ago. They have not wanted to do that. They have not chosen to do that. So that was all BS, and it's just about power and maintaining kind of a global advantage. That being said, bringing it back here, I too have been, you know, a big concern. I remember reading Mom Donnie's program when a comrade from New York, I think it was in March, had mentioned that, you know, they thought that he was going to win. And because of my trust in him, I started paying a little bit more attention, right? Just to out myself. I'm like, okay, well, if you say so, I trust where you at and your record. Let me give this a look. And definitely it was building over time. But the one thing that my first look and now a deeper interrogation since he won, I've been deeply concerned about how many of his ideas are really predicated upon some level of state support. And I want people who are listening and folks in the base to recognize that if you want a more radical experiment to go down, you better listen to Charles about what you can actually do with the billions that you directly control within the budget, because you cannot and should not expect any money to come from the federal government at this particular point in time, as long as the Republicans and Trumps are in order. And you better not expect anything to come from a local or the state assembly. Now, that some of what you can do, yes. But if you kind of liberate your mind from a certain type of dependency, that means you have to be much more creative about the resources that you have. And then there's therefore a piece around opening up, I would argue, is one of his primary tasks should, and when he get in, is to open up the democratic space. And that means in part opening up the coffers to a much more deeper interrogation around human rights budgeting or participatory budgeting.
That's
on,
right.
on like borough levels, to make more decisions be able directly enabled by the communities themselves. And you need to, I would argue, pivot for this in a much more radical way now, because that would be a sure way to ensure that there's real equity. Part of what's being it needs to be discussed. Don't fall for the blanket. We're gonna all make things equal. Can't be equal when you got 100 and I got 2, right? And
Right.
you just come in with resources. I'm still at 4, and you done moved to 200 because there's an accelerator effect if you have resources as opposed to where you don't. So we need to talk about equity. How do we get me from 2 to 100? So then we can have a real conversation about creating equality across this society. The particular ways in which he can do that, in which the movements need to start to move, pushing and demanding that, is by pushing for this human rights participatory budgeting piece. Right? Liberate these resources, right? Bring the base, from the piece. And that's for folks who actually you pulled up that piece a little bit earlier. When I was talking about the Festival of Alternatives, right? This is one of the ideas that need to come, because the movement needs to now take control of this, and don't just if you leave it to City Hall, and if you leave it to the mayor to run the program and agenda, right? You're gonna be stuck with the compromises he's gonna be forced into. And if there's a strong movement which is pushing certain things and gives him leverage to utilize the resources in a much more strategic way, you can defend and propagate what you have. And it's gonna be, look, y'all, it's different to make an argument about choking Jackson, Mississippi. We already deeply capital deficient. New York is one of the capital centers of the world. Right? I don't know, maybe Tokyo or some other place like that, London. There's hardly no rival to the amount of capital that's invested in that place. Period.
That's right.
And so they may want to do a certain type of capital strike, but they will be hurting themselves in the long term if they did that relative to New York. So they're gonna have to compromise with the movement if the movement is clear about where it wants to go, what leverage points that it has, and what it needs to execute. Now, some of the ideas I heard him articulate, personally, I would support around like the people's groceries. I would call them that rather than city groceries, things like that. But you have to organize based upon what the communities needs and who's in the communities, rather than it coming from the top down.
That's right.
Enable that from the bottom up. So there's a lot of things I can recommend from our experience. It would take a long amount of time, but the main piece is the movement now has to be in control, not just in terms of getting him in office, but really pushing this agenda. If you want the transformation, if you want the lower rents and all the different kind of stuff, that's going to have to come from the base.
That's
right?
it.
That's the paradox. You're a socialist in a capitalist country, right? And the way you just said that this so much is dependent on the state is literally the opposite politic of self-determination and mutual aid. So first, as we wrap up, everybody, thank you. These are the most comments I've had. It's hard for me to reply, interview, and produce, but I'm going to cut and paste these and maybe just have like a Q&A where people can just come on with me and we can talk about this more. As I wrap up, I do hope that people will begin to support this show even more. I was telling Colleen and a couple other people that I just want to change the focus a little bit. And I think this is the first show that's going to show that I want the analysis, but I also want to show the resistance, the wins, and the movements that are happening around this country. And what I really want to do with this show, so if you're part of an organization or a group, anywhere you're at, DM me. I want this show to begin to highlight the organizations, the farms, the Liberation Farms, the Soul Fires, the Cooperation Jacksons, all these things that are happening, the amount of interventions that are going on when ICE is trying to pick up people. I also want people to know that there are now like white men dressing up as ICE trying to take people. And I've seen a lot of videos of interventions. And when you see the video, you're like, yo, these are just some like mob lynch dudes that went to the supply surplus store and then can't show a badge because they don't have one. And also I want people to know, where are folks being taken to? Where are they being disappeared? And why I want to end on this is because this is about to really happen in Florida. Florida is building a detention center for migrants in the Everglades. They are calling it Alligator Alcatraz. They already are about to open and have 10,000 beds, $450 million a year. And the reason they want to open it and call it alligator Alcatraz is because the Attorney General of Texas said, well, if the migrants try to escape, the alligators or pythons are going to kill them. I started this show with saying how demonic and evil you have to be to take away a suicide hotline for trans people, and how extra demonic to come up with this. Like, do these people just sit down and say, what's the worst, most inhumane thing that we can do? And that we can't keep our eye, we have to keep our eye that they are arresting people every day in this country being disappeared to. And the Supreme Court is now saying that Trump can go ahead with taking people and taking them to countries that they don't belong. So as we wrap up, if I could just have a couple things. So Kali again, and then Charles and Inez. Because this is crazy. This is like the what the F thing.
Only thing I would just say, look, you know, because this was New York and this took place, it was fairly significant, but it's far from over. Don't overgeneralize what happened. Particularly, you know, there's a lot of ground to be covered. There's a lot of bases that still need to be tapped into. The organizing work that was did to get to this point is going to have to accelerate, and he's going to need to answer some questions to the Black, Latino constituents in particular. I think to elevate and get to a particular place, and then our community is going to have to hold him accountable to actually move an agenda forward and to fight and defeat capital. You know, that's where we're at, and don't make no illusions or overgrandize anything. What's on what's at play. You know, we get what we organize to take. Don't ever think otherwise.
Right.
And we talk about power, knowing what your power is. You know, we've got the potential to be able to have any of these candidates who want to get in office to be responsive and address our issues. But we've got to utilize that potential power by coming together, getting a common basis of what it is that we can address and we can agree on to move forward, and to have that person respect that and respond to that and make sure that we hold them accountable to doing that once they get in office. Because we know oftentimes people may wear that label, socialist, Democrat, whatever they want to call themselves, but their behavior belies what they say they are.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, we always say that we're not going to be able to vote our way to freedom.
That's right.
There's limitations to the electoral arena. However, I think we should focus and build like we're building with this Black radical political Congress that we're putting together across the nation. We had 3 conferences, 10 countries involved, states involved, and about maybe 60, 70 people. Take over the city councils. Because right now, if you do a power analysis, Mamdani cannot pass his budget. The city council does.
Yeah.
He cannot pass a single law without a council sponsor. Land use decisions. The mayor cannot force a developer on a city council member. A city council member has power to determine what's going to be built on city-owned land. That's how we stop gentrification. We're not gentrified because we had power. Without a press conference, without a demonstration, we stopped gentrification. We stopped Walmart from coming into our district. We made them release, along with the Jericho movement, 3 political prisoners, Jalil, Seth Hayes, and Herman Bell, because of what we did in the state assembly. It is our reparations bill that they watered down and they're trying to pass and play with now, but we did that. So, and each city council member gets $5 million for capital projects, all 51. We took $1 million out and had a participatory budget. We said, here, community, you spend that $1 million. So there's so much we can do if Black radicals, revolutionaries would get into the city councils in particular and stay revolutionary, stay ideologically inclined. And don't think that that's a panacea and we're going to be able to vote our way to freedom. We're not. But there's so much we can do. And this is providing us with a great opportunity to impact New York City politics like they never have been before.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because lastly, there could be a good trifecta if New York City folks and upstate folks come together. We're gonna have to stop Elise Stefanik, who's gonna run against Hochul, right? Like, you know, and Schumer's got to go. And then if Mamdani's in there, it could be like a perfect storm for the state of New York. And you know, if anything, I'm glad that you said what you said, Councilman, because you know our best ancestors and elders were not ever in an elected office, you know, and that you and Inez have really shown that you can be who you are. And most people in politics in New York don't care about the community. They're never going to be like, oh, tell me how you want me to spend the money. They're going to do whatever they want. But, you know, I think we have these pockets of how we can use electoral politics as part of our larger tool arsenal. So I thank you both, all three of you, for being here for a little over an hour. Like I said, fam, I'll get to these because there's so many good comments. And like I said, I'm back now weekly, you know. And again, if anybody out there know any organization we need to know about, highlight, send me some young people. I want to interview younger people, 14, 15, 16, what they're going through right now, like where it's an exciting time, even though it's a dangerous time. But as Chairman Fred Hampton said, when you dare to struggle, you dare to win. So Kalia Puno from Cooperation Jackson, Charles and Aaron, love you, our elders, like y'all give me hope all the time. And no, I'm not going to run for vice president ever again. Somebody asked me, but I might Congress. I don't like the Congress person here. And I said, maybe we'll make it a really good trifecta. His name is Paul Tonko. He needs to go too. But I have to say, I woke up today like, oh, maybe I should listen to Charles and Holly about trying this thing one more time. But also, fam, if you're ready to run, you don't need to be part of the Democratic Party or two-party system. There's other ways that you can run. And we need younger people to run, and like we need the city councils and the judges and the water commissioner and all that. So again, thank you all three for giving us this time. We'll bring you back, and I'll see everybody again. Thank you for always supporting Disruptive Chaos, which is sponsored by Cooperation Jackson. And make sure that you follow Cooperation Jackson, Liberation Farm, and Soul Fire Farm, the two farms up here. So peace, everybody. Have a good night. Be safe. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Y'all take care. Thank you.
Take care, Kylie.
All right.
Love y'all. Bye.
Bye-bye.